Okay, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Carisa Otero. I am a public school art teacher for the Los Lunas School District. This was the end of my 22nd year, and I look forward to sharing different lessons with you this week, techniques, and things that you can do with items at home, not necessarily all art materials, but things that you can upcycle and use to create something new. So the book I'm going to be reading to you is called When Picasso Met Matisse, and it's actually about two actual artists, Pablo Picasso and Henri Matisse, but in this book they're depicted as a pig and a bull. When Picasso Met Matisse by Nina Layden. There once was a young pig named Picasso. While the other piglets rolled around in the mud and played games, Picasso painted. He painted anything and everything in the most unusual way. At the same time, there once was a young bull named Matisse. Matisse was not like the other bulls. He wasn't interested in bullfighting. Matisse was happy only when he painted pictures, and he painted big, bold, bright pictures. In time, word of Picasso's talent spread throughout the pig provinces. Soon, art-loving pigs from all over lined up to buy his creations. At the same time, Matisse was getting famous in the cattle community. There weren't many households that didn't own a masterpiece. Picasso and Matisse were becoming art superstars, but this came with a price. Everybody wanted to see them. Art buyers, art sellers, art students, art historians, art groupies. It was an art attack. One day, Picasso got fed up and said, "I'm tired of this noisy pig pen." At the same time, Matisse declared, "I'm sick of this crowded cow town." Needing a change, they both decided to look for a peaceful place where they could paint without distractions. So the two artists looked far and wide for the perfect spot. Picasso found a lovely farm looking toward the east. Matisse found a handsome farm facing the west. After Picasso moved in, he went to introduce himself to his new neighbors across the road. At the same time, Matisse went to introduce himself to his new neighbor across the road. That was how Picasso met Matisse, and coincidentally, that is how Matisse met Picasso. At first, Picasso and Matisse were friendly and welcomed each other, but soon things began to change. I want you to notice the two paintings. These are called a still life, which means you can set up some items, a bowl of fruit, a collection of things, and draw them. So they both are bowls of fruit, but I want you to particularly notice Picasso's rendition. He has lots of angles and lines, and you can see the inside of the fruit. For instance, this apple looks like there was a cross section taken out, and Matisse just looks pretty realistic, like a bowl of fruit would look. So I want you to pay attention to that, because that might give you some inspiration for the project that we're going to work on today. It all started one day when Picasso criticized one of Matisse's paintings. Then Matisse made fun of one of Picasso's. Matisse called Picasso an art hog. Then Picasso called Matisse a mad cow. Matisse quipped, "You paint like a 2-year-old. Picasso retorted, "You paint like a wild beast." Matisse raged, "Your colors look like mud." Picasso spat, "Your paintings look like color by numbers." Then things got really out of hand. It was a modern art mess. Picasso stormed off into his house. "That Matisse, he doesn't like my art," he huffed. "Well, I'll show him." Then Matisse bullied his way into his house. "I'll give that Picasso something he can criticize," he snorted. Then a full-scale feud erupted, but in the most unusual battle. Armed with ladders and buckets of paint, Matisse launched the first attack. He started at dawn. By the end of the evening, he had succeeded in transforming the outside of his house into a monster-sized masterpiece. Not to be outdone, Picasso fired up his paintbrushes and, in full view of the enemy, counterattacked. He turned his farm into a huge and outrageous pork of art. The two artists then retreated into their houses and pulled down the shades. Picasso certainly didn't want to look out his window and stare at a Matisse, and Matisse had no desire to give his room a view of a Picasso? This presented a problem. There seemed to be only one solution. Without a word to each other, Picasso and Matisse each built a fence, a huge wooden fence, down the middle of the road. At first, Picasso and Matisse seemed satisfied. Both went back to painting by themselves, but after a while, Picasso was surprised to find he missed that bull-headed Matisse. At the same time, Matisse found his studio empty without the presence of that pig-headed Picasso. Picasso pondered, that Matisse, he isn't such a bad artist. He has some interesting ideas. Matisse moaned, that Picasso may not paint like me, but he knows what he's doing. However, being naturally pig-headed and bull-headed, neither artist knew how to apologize to each other, so they did what they do best. They let their paintbrushes do the talking. Picasso painted on one side of the fence and Matisse painted on the other. Each worked until they were exhausted. It was strangely quiet when they were done. Then, curious to see what Matisse had been up to, Picasso sprinted across to the other side. At the same time, Matisse galloped over to Picasso's side. The silence was broken, and the two artists began laughing at their amazing work of art. From that day on, Picasso and Matisse became great friends. They happily took down the fence that shared their different views. A few months later, a big museum bought the fence. Picasso called his side when Picasso met Matisse. Matisse called his side when Matisse met Picasso. The critics called it incredible. And in the back of the book, it gives you a little bit of information about the two artists, Picasso and Matisse. So Matisse was born in December 31st, 1869 in France. Matisse didn't want to be an artist when he was little. He studied to be a lawyer, but when he was 20, he got sick with appendicitis, and while he was getting better, he started painting, and he liked it so much that was the end of his law career. And Picasso was born in Spain, October 25th, 1881. His father was an art teacher who helped him start painting when he was young, and it soon was very evident that he had this natural talent. He decided to move to Paris, and that is where Picasso and Matisse actually met. And they did have disagreements, but they realized that they respected each other as artists and their different styles. So our project today is going to be based on Picasso's style, which is cubism. And we're going to be using something hopefully you have laying around the house, which is a brown paper grocery sack, which I did this one sort of inspired by Frida Kahlo, which is another artist, a female artist from Mexico. And I used chalk pastels, but if you don't have chalk pastels, you can use whatever you have on hand. Here's another one that looks a little more cubist style. What's nice about this is that you don't have to have your features, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth have to be symmetrical, because this isn't realistic. You can have the perspective where the eye is facing this way and this one's looking straight on. And what I did is I actually used a white color pencil first to sketch out the designs. I have a couple here. Okay, and I also have another version where you can use a lunch sack, paper lunch sack, and you could turn it into a puppet when you're done. Okay, so you could use a white color pencil or a white piece of chalk to sketch out the features before you start. And notice you can make it very angular, lots of lines. You could play around with different features on the whatever you create. Okay, and for these particular ones, I'm using chalk pastel because they're a little more forgiving when you're blending. And what I tell my students in my classroom is that you want to just use 1 or 2 fingers to blend. You don't necessarily want to use your whole hand, because this tends to get a little messy, which messy is fine in art, but you don't want to be covered in the chalk. And you can just use 1 or 2 fingers to blend and layer colors, play around. I'm going to get this magenta color and add a little detail. This is supposed to be a hat. And there again, I can use my fingers to blend, and I can layer colors, find colors that complement each other. I think I'll choose some more of this blue and sort of make an outline. And then I can use my finger again and just blend. Okay, and if you don't have chalk pastel, I also got some sidewalk chalk. I have a whole bucket of sidewalk chalk you could use. It's just not as, it doesn't have as much blending, doesn't blend as easily, but still you can see the same kind of effect. Okay, and you can layer colors, and this is not realistic, so I'm putting all variety of colors. I have green on this, is supposed to be a woman, on her nose, and she's got a yellow eye and a purple eye, and then I can add some detail to the lips. There again, blending. And then when you're all done, what you can do to set the chalk so it won't smudge as much is you can just get hairspray, kind of cheap hairspray, spray it, let it dry, and then it'll keep the chalk from smudging, to keep it from doing that. So I look forward to seeing what you come up with on Friday when we have time to share some of these lessons, and I hope you have fun.